Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is John. Glad to have you join me. As you probably know if you've stuck around and watched me for a while, I use this channel as mostly a way to record and talk about the books that I've read. Mostly what I like to do is create long-form book reviews of single books on the order of 8 or 10 or 12 pages long and minutes long, and post them. But starting at the end of 2021, the last day of 2021 actually, I decided to start posting videos which showed everything that I had read, sort of a year in review of books. And I did that on the last day of 2021. 2022 was a very busy working year for me and not so much of a reading year. So that came and passed, and I never got it done. 2023 also came and passed, never got that done. So I want to go back and record a video where I not just review the books that I'm talking about, but show them very quickly in passing with maybe 30 seconds worth of commentary, in case people aren't interested in sitting through a 10-minute long review. I know they're not for everyone. So this is not a typo in the title. These are all the books that I read in 2023. These are the books I read in 2022. There are not a lot of them. Like I said, it was more of a working year for me than a reading one. But I wanted to show them nonetheless. So in order, from January onward, the first book I read was Heidegger's Children. Hannah Arendt, Karl Lowith, Hans Jonas, and Herbert Marcuse by Richard Wolin. Richard Wolin is largely pretty skeptical of Heidegger's, what he would call his obscurantism and his mystical bents. But Arendt, Lowith, Jonas, and Marcuse are four of Heidegger's students. And this book looks at their relationships, their intellectual relationships, their friendships. And if you recognize one of the names there, it's probably that of Hannah Arendt, whose relationship with Heidegger was not just an intellectual one. She was one of his students, but it was also romantic. Despite Heidegger's somewhat problematic relationship with the Nazi Party, and the fact that Hannah Arendt was herself Jewish. So a very, very good book, sort of four pictures of his relationships with his students. A book that hopefully needs little to no introduction. This is Watership Down by Richard Adams. Apparently, this was told by Richard Adams to his children on a series of very long car rides. And years later, they got him to write it down in book form, and we wouldn't have this novel otherwise. It is a story of a warren of rabbits, their tales, adventures, fights, jealousies, all of that good stuff. I read it. It wasn't great, but I'm glad I read it, and I can finally talk about it if it ever comes up in polite conversation. Let's see. This is Existential Monday, Philosophical Essays by Benjamin Fondin. And this is put out by New York Review of Books. Fondin is a philosopher I hadn't heard of, but he was an existentialist, as many early 20th century philosophers were. And he's one of the ones that wasn't, at least now, is not terribly well read. So I like the fact that they have released some of his stuff. I read this with two other booktubers who, people who are sort of booktube adjacent, talk about ideas and books occasionally on their channel. And we have a series of discussions, I think at least two discussions about this book on my channel. If you search Fondin, I think I created a playlist with them in there. Next up is Cousin Bet by Henri de Balzac, the classic novel of family jealousy and deception and deceit and all of that great stuff. Really, really wonderful novel. I eventually want to read its brother or sister novel. You could call it the cousin novel if you like. It's called, is it Cousin Pons? A character with the name of Pons, Pons, is in it. And it's supposed to be the companion novel, is the word I was looking for, to this one. Next is, I guess 2022 was the year of reading philosophy. For me, this is work by Georges Bataille. This is the Accursed Share, Volume 1. Volume 2 and 3 are also put out by Zone Books, which is an affiliate, I believe, of Princeton University Press. And it comes in one book, even though it's volumes 2 and 3. I have only read volume 1. And the Accursed Share that he refers to is the economy of the extra, the economy of the surplus. Often when we're talking about economy, we think about things that need to be reserved, things that need to be saved, things that need to be apportioned and allotted because we only have a certain amount of them. This book, I mean, think about money, think about resources, time. We have finite amounts of those things, so they have to be saved. There are things that we have, for all intents and purposes, an infinite amount of. Think about sunlight, for example, solar energy. I know the sun will eventually disappear, but for human purposes, humans will probably disappear long before the sun will. So for us, it is basically infinite or close to infinite. And that extra, that stuff that we can't use, is what he calls the Accursed Share. And he writes about it, how different cultures use it and think about it. It was an interesting book, and you can, like I said, see my review of any of these. This is sort of a perennial booktube favorite. Elegiac, beautiful, gorgeous, slow prose, and a wonderful story that I will probably read again, hopefully one day. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. Also by NYRB. Another NYRB book. This is Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. This is a book about a young woman who finds herself, moves in with her family, finds herself sort of stifled by their presence, moves out onto her own, and is sort of a novel about a woman's self-discovery. I don't know if you want to call it a feminist novel, but it does. The protagonist is a woman, and it is about her own sense of self and discovering it maybe in a way that she wouldn't have been able to discover it living with her family and around her family as unmarried women 100 years ago were wont to do in her situation. This is a book I didn't really like. Kind of critiqued it in my review, but this is A Spectre of Race: How Discrimination Haunts Western Democracy by Michael G. Hanchard. This is from Princeton University Press. It was not great, but I do a lot better of talking about it in the actual review. I just remember it being very repetitive. The first third of the book really not relating to the second 2/3 of the book very well. Seemed like kind of poorly tossed together to me. But Now, this was intended to be my reading project for 2022 and maybe some of 2023. And I started it. I got through the 5th book. The books are arranged a little bit awkwardly, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then work happened, and I wasn't able to come back to it, and it's kind of complex. So if I would have gone back to it, I would have been completely lost. The book is Anthony Pohl's Dance to the Music of Time. This is the first movement. By the way, this is University of Chicago Press. This is the first movement, which contains the first 3 novels. So there are also movements 2, 3, and 4, which contain a total of 12. Each book has 3 of them. So I made it halfway through the second movement, which is about halfway through the 5th book. And like I said, things got busy. But I didn't finish that second movement, so it's not included in the list. I just finished this one. Really, really beautiful writing. It tells the story of 4 friends at university who meet at university. Or maybe it's like the English equivalent of high school, perhaps? I forgot. But as they age and as they grow older, they form relationships and other friendships, romantic relationships, and their relationships all sort of expand and interconnect in interesting ways, and really complex ways. If I ever come back to this, I need to take notes on the characters because the relationships get complicated. And in fact, there's a book that I bought that is completely dedicated to tracing out the relationships and certain references in this entire cycle of novels. So when I know I'm going to have more time to be able to dedicate to maybe reading all 12 of them, I will maybe do that. I don't know when I'll have that kind of time because it's 2,500 pages, 3,000 pages, something like that. Next, I occasionally like picking up little books like this because they're easy to pick up and put down. This is Michael Dirda, his readings, essays, and literary entertainments. You probably recognize Michael Dirda's name if you're an avid reader of the Washington Post. He was a senior editor at the Washington Post Book World for a long time and maybe still is. These are just occasional pieces, book reviews, pieces about books he's passionate about, interested in, lists of his favorite genres of books like science fiction, detective novels, things like that, and other things I'm actually interested in reading. A couple of the lists didn't really interest me too much, but I enjoyed it. He has a couple of other books along these lines, one about classics, too, which I think I have, but have not read. This is The Cynic and the Fool, The Unconscious in Theology and Politics by Tad DeLay. I was sent this book by, and you see right there, it's called Whiffenstock.com. The publishing company is called Whiffenstock. This book is about the biases, the way that we think about controversial topics like religion and politics, and how we can be really entrenched in our own ideas, maybe not be able to see our own biases, and how we think about topics like that we really become invested in and therefore become controversial to talk about, or say around, a holiday dinner table or something. Some really neat, insightful pieces. There are maybe 8 or 10 short set pieces in here, and came away with some good ideas. This is The Inheritors, an intimate portrait of South Africa's racial reckoning by E. Fairbanks. E. Fairbanks is an American who lives in South Africa, and this is her journalistic portrait of a small group of South Africans who lived through the apartheid regime, and it's last year's 70s, 80s, early 90s, and and they talk about it with her. She meets these people, writes about them, their relationships, and especially what life is like in the aftermath of apartheid. And so often we think that, well, apartheid is done now. It's been over for 30 years. Uh, so everything is okay. Well, uh, you might not be surprised to learn that's not exactly the way things have worked out there. And the past always tends to cast a long shadow. And this book is largely about that shadow. A really great book. I sang its praises in my review. 5 stars by any measure. This is another book I never would have read had I not been sent it for free. This is from Spiegel and Grau, right there. This is by Katie Hickman. It is called Bravehearted, The Women of the American West. And it's a series of stories, vignettes, biographies of women who went to the American West by themselves, with their families, managed to get there in all different kinds of ways, and what they did when they got there, how they lived, how they eked out a life and a living. And they did it in all different kinds of ways. Some stayed at home. Some were entrepreneurs. Some helped other people get to the West. Some were ladies of the night. So, I mean, it just, all kinds of women, all different kinds of backgrounds, really, really interestingly woven together story. And one of the things that really sticks with me about the book is how brutal and how horribly violent the American West was before it was more fully settled and turned into, I guess, a series of American states. But back in the middle of the 19th century, it was horribly, horribly violent, and it sounded like a horrible place to live. But 2 more books. This is Great Tales from English History, with one of those really long, unwieldy subtitles, a treasury of true stories about the extraordinary people. Knights and Knaves, Rebels and Heroes, Queens and Commoners Who Made Britain Great by Robert Lacey. This is a series of stories, very, very short stories, about events in English history, going all the way back to Hadrian's Wall. And in fact, the very first one goes well before that. It is Cheddar Man. 71 centuries BC. So, and going all the way through the 20th century. Most of the 20th century, at least. Many of them are very, very short, on the order of 1 or 2 or 3 pages. Very accessible, very, very approachable, very popular British history, if that is your thing. And the one thing I did like about this is that it talks about a lot of events and people that I had never heard of. So not just the big names, the big events, the big battles that you always hear about, but some of the things that don't always get full-length books dedicated to them. And I really appreciated that. Last but not least, this is Anthony Grafton's Forgers and Critics, Creativity and Duplicity in Western Scholarship. Now, Anthony Grafton is usually someone I love to read. He is maybe one of the best living scholars of early modern European intellectual history working today. This is from Princeton University Press. Anthony Grafton is a a professor at Princeton University. And this book explores the relationships between forgery, ideas of forgery, ideas of authenticity, what it means to be authentic within a tradition of literary and textual criticism. So it's kind of nerdy, but it's kind of me. So if something like that interests you, you can go read my review. I would say this is a little condensed and distilled for me. This is only 130 to 140 pages. This book needs to be 3 times this long, or 4 times this long. Anthony Grafton is at his best when he's writing something that's more fully fleshed out than this, I think. That's what this book needs. It needs more examples. It needs more commentary. This is sort of distilled lecture form Anthony Grafton, which I appreciate, but I think Princeton University Press can do better, and I would like to see that. But that wraps up for everything I was able to read in 2022. Like I said, slow reading year. 2023 was better, and I will do that video soon. And I can only hope, fingers crossed, that 2024 will be even better. I hope yours is. And until then, I will see you soon.